Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo! I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another episode of Buha's Block. On today's show, we're going to be doing part 2 of our mailbag. As I said in part 1, I got over 90 questions for this mailbag. I unfortunately cannot answer all of them, but I'm going to try to answer as many as I can. So on today's episode, I'm going to go a little bit quicker with some of the answers, particularly toward the end, but I wanted to try and get to as many of them as possible. So I'm trying to get to about 30 of them overall between the two mailbags. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. All right, first question from @Rama Aviation on YouTube. Do you think LeBron should be in consideration for Player of the Month and First Team All-NBA? In short, yes, I think he should be in consideration for both. The longer answer is I think he will be in consideration for both, but I don't think he's going to win either. So looking at Player of the Month, we'll start with that one. LeBron is averaging 29.0 points per game this month, 9.4 rebounds, 7.4 assists, 1.2 steals, 0.8 blocks. Those are largely in line with his career numbers, which is just crazy for this guy to be doing this at 40. His percentages are absolutely ridiculous. 55.7% from the floor, 46% from threes, 75% from the free throw line. So his shooting splits are great. And the Lakers are 7-2 in the 9 games that he has played. I look at Shea and Ant as the two primary competitors or contenders with him for Player of the Month in the West. And my guess is that Shea gets it. He's averaging 32 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists per game. OKC is 9-2 with him, so a couple more wins than the Lakers. And his plus minus is absurd this month. In looking at that versus LeBron's, I think Shea probably gets the edge. Now, I think LeBron deserves to be considered, and I would probably put him number 2 in the West right now. And I wouldn't be surprised with all the attention around the Lakers right now if maybe he does end up getting that nod. But Shea, to me, has emerged as the front runner for MVP right now. I think he's had an awesome month, and I would suspect that Shea ends up getting Player of the Month for February. But LeBron should be in, they always have the other players considered. LeBron should be right there at the top, if not potentially win it. I wouldn't be shocked if he won it. I just think Shea, given all the momentum for him with MVP, is probably going to win it. And then looking at all NBA first team, the teams have gone positionless. However, I do suspect that a lot of voters will, you've seen, they've tended to still kind of stick to the 3 front court, 2 back court players with especially the first team. And I think LeBron has a legitimate shot to make the first team roster. I would say that if voters are going by front court, back court loosely, Jokic, Tatum, Giannis, I think those are 3 locks with the front court. The one note with Giannis is that he's 6 games away from being ineligible for the All-NBA and awards. So that would be a potential path for LeBron to get onto the first team. But if you're just going by top 5, I think you then look at MVP ballots. And as I mentioned, I think Jokic, Tatum, and Giannis are going to be locks. Those are 2, 3, and 4 in the latest ESPN straw poll for the MVP. And then Shea, of course, is the current front runner. So I think those 4 guys, assuming they all meet the 65 game threshold, all 4 will be on first team NBA. Then that 5th spot opens up to LeBron. It opens up to Donovan Mitchell. It opens up to Jalen Brunson. It opens up to Karl Anthony Towns. But between those 4, I think Mitchell probably gets on as the fifth guy, and LeBron is an All-NBA second team guy. But there's a lot of time left. The Lakers have 26 games remaining this season. So if they get the 2 seed or the 3 seed, if LeBron continues to put up these kinds of numbers and is arguably their best player, then I think he has a real shot to earn that 5th spot. We'll see how the voting goes. I have a vote this year. I have not decided yet, obviously, how I'm going to vote All-NBA. I think those 4 guys that I mentioned are locks for me on the first team, and then I'm leaving it open to see how I want to vote for the 5th spot. But I think LeBron has a legitimate shot, and I'm strongly considering voting for him, not only for first team All-NBA, but for that 5th spot on the MVP ballot. Next question is a series of questions from Spiritual Queen 2432. There are 4 questions here. A couple of these I'm just going to rattle through quickly. But question number 1, what are the largest threats of the teams we may see in the playoffs, and what are the in-game adjustments to make to lessen them? Number 2, what is our seed range in terms of how hard this schedule will go, and how can where we land affect our Larry chances? Number 3, is Cam deep in the doghouse and Rui firmly starting, partially due to purge Darvin's sins? And 4, do we go full small ball and convert Williamson's 2-way, or do we err on the side of size and caution and convert Trey or Koloko? And if so, which one? I will answer these backwards. So for number 4, I'm not sure who you're referring to here with Williams. I'm going to assume you mean Jordan Goodwin, because you're saying that player is a 2-way player and you're referencing small ball. I think right now I would lean more toward converting Jordan Goodwin, but between him and Trey Jemison and Christian Koloko. I don't know what's happened with Koloko, where it seems like he's kind of fallen out of favor. And I know part of it is the games played and the Lakers trying to balance that, but they've also had him in uniform on several nights and just not played him. And of course, like you need just having like that big out there in case things go haywire and Jackson gets injured or in foul trouble or whatever, and like you need another big. But there have been plenty of nights where Koloko's been available and they've just opted not to play him or opted to play Trey Jemison. So I almost feel like, based on the way that this has gone, the current hierarchy would probably be Goodwin, Jemison, then Koloko. But I would have it Goodwin, Koloko, Jemison personally, and still I'm leaving it open to Koloko potentially being the most logical player to convert, just because I think he brings a certain skill set that the Lakers really need and that they can't quite get anywhere else on the roster. Question 3, Cam is deep in the doghouse. He's been in the doghouse since the San Antonio game, and we've seen the Lakers have gone to Goodwin, Connect, and Shake Milton ahead of Cam. So it just seems like he's not going to be playing moving forward, barring some type of injury or something. And that's also why I think if the Lakers do end up waiving someone and converting someone or signing someone, it's probably going to be Cam Reddish. Rui starting, it's not to purge Darvin's sins, and the Cam in the doghouse is not to purge Darvin's sins. I think JJ just really likes Rui, and to his in his defense, Rui's been playing really well. So again, I'm still on the DFS over Rui side in terms of long-term starting, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So Rui's been playing at a very high level. Question 2, what is our seed range in terms of how hard the schedule will go? I think as things are constructed, the Lakers seed range is between 2 and 5. In a disaster scenario, maybe you can say they drop to 6. I don't see that happening. I think realistically, with how the West is structured right now, they have a 5-game advantage in the loss column over the 6 seed. So I think things would really have to go off the rails for the Lakers to drop to number 6. So right now, I think it's between 2 and 5. I think that potentially puts them in the 4-5 matchup, just with how tough their remaining schedule is. They have the 4th hardest remaining schedule according to Tankathon. However, with the way that they're playing, they've won 15 of 19. They're rolling right now. And I think you could also make the case that maybe they exceed expectations and surprise us all, and they earn the 2 seed or the 3 seed and play their way above a Denver or a Memphis. So I think the Lakers are going to be firmly in that mix between 2 and 5. It's just a matter of, can they stay healthy? How do they fare against this schedule? And then also, what happens with the other teams? Can those teams stay healthy? How do they fare with their respective schedules? There's a lot of moving parts here, a lot of things that won't be determined until the next like month and a half. But I think the Lakers will likely be between the 2 and the 5 seed, almost certainly, I would say. And then the first thing, what are the largest threats of the teams we may see in the playoffs and in-game adjustments? I think that the Lakers' 2 biggest concerns right now, in my opinion, are number 1, teams that switch a lot and their ability to contain the Lakers' actions and their penetration and their ability to get downhill and forcing them into being a jump shooting team that drains out the clock and just the offense kind of gets gummed up a bit. So we saw that most recently in the Utah game in Utah, the Charlotte game at home, the Portland game on the road, and this Dallas game at home. For stretch, like some of those teams switch more than the others, and it really depends on the lineups. But there were stretches of those 4 respective games where, I mean, the Lakers lost a couple of them to inferior teams in Utah and Charlotte. They almost lost to Portland and Dallas. So like those games were partly kept close because of those teams' ability to switch and just contain the Lakers offense and force them into being more of a perimeter group. And then it just comes down to, are they making their shots or not? And the nights that they are, it looks great, right? But the nights that they're not, if they're not getting to the rim as much, if they're not getting to the free throw line as much, if they're not generating driving kick opportunities, that's where I think sometimes the spacing and the organization, all that stuff can get a bit mucked up. So I think the Lakers really have to, if I'm JJ and Greg St. Jean and this coaching staff, I'm focusing on the film with some of these recent games and figuring out, like, it's still early in the process with Luka, so I don't want to overreact and say that this is going to be like their Achilles heel. But as we look at how they match up with teams like Boston and OKC, who to me are the 2 best teams in the league and 2 very switch heavy teams, I think that's one thing that the Lakers are going to have to figure out is their offense against switch heavy teams with a bunch of like-sized big wings. Then the second thing for me is the defensive end. The flip side is I still think the Lakers have some issues against isolation scores. We saw it against Kyrie. We saw it a bit against LaMelo. I think like some of the quicker, shiftier guards, the Lakers don't have that Max Christie type defender anymore. I think Gabe Vincent is too small for those types of guys. And then Dorian Finney-Smith, Vando, I don't think they quite have the foot speed to keep up with some of those guys. The other part is the wing defense. Like, I want to see what they look like against a Shea, a Tatum, a Kawhi, a Kevin Durant, a Jimmy Butler. And right now that they're going to be putting those assignments largely on Rui, at least with the starting group, until DFS or Vando comes in. So I want to see what that looks like. And that kind of compounds with the rim protection, because I think in those instances, they're able to space the Lakers out and just get downhill and create high percentage looks at the rim. So like, I guess the rim protection and the defensive rebounding are also concerns. In terms of how they combat that, I think offensively, they got to just remain organized and stop. Sometimes I think they get goaded into mismatch hunting and just stalling offensively. I think you got to be selective with it. I think they just got to be smarter about how they attack switch heavy defenses. The second thing, I think it's got to be loading up the paint more. I do think one thing would be playing DFS and Vando and potentially Gabe a little bit more and leaning more into your better defenders. I think starting DFS over Rui is a way to help that with the starting group. But again, I don't think that's going to happen. So I think just being smarter about like how much certain guys are playing, how you deploy them, and just continuing to play a bunch of bigger lineups, even if they are smaller without a center, just making sure the big wings are out there, which I think JJ has largely done. The third one, I think it's going to have to be like the team locking in similar to the Denver game plan of everyone, like all 5 guys being close to the paint, boxing out, rotating, scrambling, just being locked in and in sync on that end of the floor. You can have 5 guys in the paint and Steven Adams might just push the ball out of the way in his like 10, 12 minutes off the bench in Houston. And like, there's just nothing you can do there, right? So there are going to be some physical limitations just with this roster construction. But I think if the Lakers are intentional with how they approach things defensively and with boxing out and rotating and being on a string, I think they can be good enough defensively to get by. And like, look, they've been the best defense in the league for over a month. So I'm not trying to create a problem that's not there, but I do think there's an element of like, we've yet to see this group outside of the Denver game, which was arguably their best execution game of the season. We've yet to see them against the Houston and OKC and Memphis. Like I want to see some of those matchups and how they fare against those front courts. Because I just think they have to be so locked in on a nightly basis that in the playoffs, I think they will be like that. In the regular season, can they do that every game the rest of the way? We shall see. But I think those are my three concerns, but I think the Lakers are equipped to handle all of them to varying degrees. Next one from @Braden Laker, Yo Brate. Top 3 realistic centers the Lakers could target in the offseason, in parentheses, sign or trade. I got a lot of center questions, so I apologize that I was not able to answer all of them. They were all largely along these lines of like top 3 centers, top 5 centers, who's realistic, is this player realistic, is this player realistic? So I tried to find one that combined sort of the essence of all the questions, and also Braden, as he says in the question here, is my brate. So I had to answer his question. But in terms of top 3 realistic centers, sign or trade, I do want to temper expectations, at least from a signing perspective. The Lakers are not projected to have much more space outside of the taxpayer MLE, which is about $5.7 million a year. And so could LeBron take a discount, or could they do a salary dumping trade to open up that non-taxpayer MLE of about $12 million a year? Yes, potentially, but I don't want to just assume that's going to happen. So I think realistically, if we're looking at signing guys, it's in that 5.7 million range, and that doesn't get you a lot, to be honest. So the 3 names I wrote down that, just looking at the free agent class, looking at the current center market, the current centers that could be available for trade, I came up with 3 names, and I'm going to put them in this order. And please, aggregators, don't aggregate me. This is just me making some educated assumptions based on who the Lakers have targeted and what their needs are and whatnot. I'm sure I will still get aggregated, but I just had to offer that disclaimer. So number 1 is going to be Steven Adams, actually, because Steven Adams was a guy who the Lakers had interest in going into this trade deadline. As Sam Amick of The Athletic reported for us, Adams was a guy that the Lakers inquired about. So I think with him being an unrestricted free agent, he's a guy that could make some sense and could be available either potentially for a minimum contract or upwards of that taxpayer MLE at about 5.7. Maybe the Lakers sign him to like a 2 years, $11-12 million dollar contract, something like that, or 3 years, $15 million, whatever, something like that. That's reasonable and not like an albatross on their cap sheet. The issue with Adams is like he has aged a bit. He's no longer like, I don't think he's a starting caliber center anymore. So it's like, then I guess you're rolling with Adams and Hayes, and Hayes remains the starter probably. And Adams is just like that physical setter option, which is fine. But I just wonder if the Lakers are better served by trying to get a better player at either trying to create that extra financial room to sign a better player, or just trying to go after that player in a trade. The second name I have here is Clint Capella. And this was a guy that the Lakers have had interest in the past, and he is going to be an unrestricted free agent as well. I would assume that he's a guy that goes for at least the taxpayer MLE, if not the non-taxpayer MLE, and maybe he signs some type of like 2-year, $22-23 million deal, but maybe it is a little bit lower. Maybe like he's averaging about 9 points, 9 rebounds, and a block. So he's not quite the same player that he was, but he is a vertical lob threat still. Again, not like his Houston days or his early Atlanta days. But that is a skill set that the Lakers have wanted, with Luka obviously going after Mark Williams. So I would put Clint Capella a little bit less likely, just because he might be priced out of the Lakers' range. And like, I think he's better than Jonas Valanciunas. And like, if Jonas Valanciunas got the contract that he got from Washington and the Lakers were interested in him, I think Clint Capella should be somewhere in that, like, maybe not quite full non-taxpayer MLE, but between the taxpayer and the non-taxpayer. And remember, you don't have to use your full non-taxpayer. You could use part of it. So I think he's probably a little bit less likely just because of the price. And then number 3, Nick Claxton, who to me is the best center who realistically could be available on the trade market. He has a descending contract structure, so he's making less money progressively each season. He's got 3 more years left on his deal. Lakers and Nets have a good relationship in terms of making trades. And I think it really just comes down to what the Lakers feel like they need, and is Claxton actually available? The Nets traded Schroeder at DFS, right? But they didn't trade Cam Johnson. They didn't trade Claxton. They didn't trade Day'Ron Sharpe. Like, they've tried to keep some of these guys. So I don't know how they're going to view Claxton this offseason, but he is someone that I think would draw interest from the Lakers and from other teams, and it would probably be something similar to the Mark Williams package. Now, because of the salary, the Lakers would have to probably put Rui or Gabe and Kleba and someone else, or like they'd have to match salary to get to Nick Claxton's figure, but they now have multiple expiring contracts. They have upwards of $40 million in expirings. They still have their pick, they still have their swap, and Dalton could potentially be a guy that they try to include in that. So I could see Nick Claxton going for something similar to the Mark Williams package, though it would require real rotation guys, either in the form of Rui or Gabe, or potentially even both, just in terms of salary matching. So I would order them in that way. I think, like, could the Lakers try to find a way to get Miles Turner, who's going to be an unrestricted free agent? Could they try to circle the block with Dallas, try to trade for Daniel Gafford? I think there's some other options. As I said on here before, Jalen Duren was another name I heard the Lakers had been interested in and trying to pursue before the Mark Williams trade. Could they circle the block on him? Though he's been playing at a really high level, I don't think he's necessarily going to be available. So those are some of the names that I think could be out there. It's slim pickings. If you look at the free agent class, like, it's Brook Lopez, but I don't know what his market's going to necessarily be. Mo Wagner, they have a team option on him. Like, it just gets really, like, Naz Reid, I think, is going to be priced out of, like, he has a $15 million player option. He is not going to take less than that to go play for the Lakers. He's going to be getting 20 plus million. So maybe, again, the Lakers can find a way to be creative and create the ability to sign and trade for him, but that also hard caps you at the first apron. So you really have to make some tough cuts if you're going to get a guy like Naz Reid, or even a guy like Miles Turner or someone like that. So I think more realistically, unless they do a bigger trade like the Claxton trade or like a Duren trade or something, it's probably going to be signing a center for the taxpayer MLE or the non-taxpayer MLE. But they have a lot of time to figure this out. They have a lot of time to evaluate the roster. And depending on how the rest of the season goes, both in the regular season and the playoffs, we will have some clarity as to, like, which guys make sense. And are they willing to trade Rui? Are they, like, or is Rui playing so well that they're like, we got to keep this guy? And they got DFS's free agency situation and Vando and his contract. And, like, there's a lot for the Lakers to figure out here. So I think you're asking me right now, and I'm giving you my perspective right now, but I'm certainly open to that changing depending on how things unfold with the Lakers, but also with the center market and how things look going into the offseason. Next one from @Jarred Santiago on X. After setting highs in three-point attempts, Lakers have recently toned it down. Was it just a matter of JJ telling them to ease up on shooting, or was there a tweak in their offensive scheme? This is a good question because I think the Lakers have toned it down a little bit, but I don't think it's because JJ told them to ease up on shooting. Like, JJ wants this group to take a lot of threes. And on the LFR pod, they made a good note that anytime the Lakers have had a break in terms of, like, beginning of the season or the in-season tournament break or the All-Star break, they come out of those breaks taking more threes. And that's because that is a clear emphasis for JJ and this coaching staff offensively, is for this group to take more threes. Remember, entering the season, he said he wanted them to take 5 to 6 more threes, which would have been about 37, 38 a game. That would have put them in the back end of the top 10 in terms of three-point attempts per game last season. And now in the Luka era, they've attempted 40 or more threes in 4 of the 5 games with Luka. So I think this is a partly an emphasis from JJ and the coaching staff, but it's also partly the way that Luka plays and the types of shots that he generates and his ability to spray the ball all over the floor. Like if you are cheating off of a weak side shooter, Luka will find that player in a heartbeat. And I think that's something we've seen within the Lakers offense. Now, I think they have toned it down a little bit because I think they were just taking the first available shot, and they need to balance that. Remember going back to like the preseason, there was all those pull up threes in transition from guys like Max and Gabe and Rui. And it was just like, that's not really the way that this group should be playing. I think that you got to be smart and selective with the types of threes. Not all threes are created equal. Like, yes, you need to have a modern style of offense, and you need to be a threat to make threes and space the floor, and like there needs to be that balance there. But I think at times the Lakers have tilted a little bit too much in the direction of just like take the first shot available and not really think about shot quality or context of the game, time and score, all that stuff. So I think they've course corrected a little bit there in terms of just trying to take smarter threes. But clearly there's been a shift post Luka trade, and just with this group recalibrating their offense, that they want to take more threes moving forward. It's just about the right guys taking threes and the right context of them. So I think in general, like they're not going to be a team that takes 50 plus threes a game. I think those are more aberrations than anything, and more them figuring out the offense and just adjusting. But I do think they're a team that can be taking 40 plus threes again. They've taken 40 plus in 4 of the 5 games with Luka. But again, I think it just comes down to shot quality, context, and just making sure that they're keeping it within a certain range, within a certain balance, and not just taking threes just to take them. Next one from Rashawn_954 on X. Rank these players: Austin Reaves, Tyrese Haliburton, Bradley Beal, Paul George. I have a ranking for you, and I'm going to keep this one short, but I will give you my ranking. It is Tyrese Haliburton, Austin Reaves, Bradley Beal, Paul George. And that's an insane thing to be saying. Like I did not expect on February 26th, 2025 to be saying Austin Reaves is better than Bradley Beal and Paul George, but he's had a better season than those guys. He's currently playing better than both of those guys. His numbers are better than both of those guys, both on a per game basis, a per 100 possession basis, and from an advanced metrics perspective. So I think Tyrese Haliburton, I wouldn't put him in this grouping or this tier. I think he's a guy who's in his own grouping. Like I think he's firmly a top 30 player in the league. I know from a statistical perspective, he's been a little bit down. Indiana hasn't had quite the same success that they had last year, but I think Tyrese Haliburton's an awesome player. I think he's a franchise player. Now, Austin, Beal, and George are like relatively close because I do think Beal and George, they're partly like part of it's due to circumstance and just them being the number 3 guys in their respective situations and not necessarily having things catered to them the way it was in previous seasons. However, Austin's just been straight up better than them. Beal versus George is close, but I do give Beal the nod based on his season. I think George has had a really disappointing season. I think Beal has acclimated relatively well to coming off the bench. A lot of drama in Phoenix, but also a lot of drama in Philadelphia. So I think Austin's just, especially looking at the last couple of months, Austin's just been straight up better than those 2 guys. So I would go again, Haliburton, Austin, Beal, and George. Beal and George, I guess you could convince me that George is the better player. George versus Beal, longer term, I might lean George because he's bigger, he's a better defender, he has a better track record, he's a better player throughout the context of their careers. Yeah, I have Austin ahead of Beal and George, which is a wild thing to say, but also, in my opinion, a very accurate thing to say. He's clearly a better third option than either one of those guys right now. Next one from @DavidMelvin23 on X. What do you think Vando's ideal role should be, and what do you think is the sweet spot between under/overuse? He picked up fouls in Denver, but caused chaos. Not sure if he can have more than 15 minutes given the zone teams can throw to stagnate the Lakers' offense. This is something I talked about last night on the Lakers-Mavs postgame stream when I was asked about Vando and why he doesn't play more. I think I said like somewhere in that like 18 to 22, 24 minute a night range, depending on the matchup. I think there are offensive limitations and complications. He made a couple threes against the Mavericks, and I think the Lakers have largely used him as well as possible from a spacing perspective, but it does allow teams to hide weaker defenders on him and really just load up the paint. And then defensively, I think he's been good to really good. I don't think he's quite gotten back to being the caliber of defender he was pre-injury. Now he's still been impactful, as you said, the Denver game, and he's had some stretches where he just causes chaos out there. Like, even if he's not quite himself, he's still out there wreaking havoc, causing chaos. I think he's been playing well, to be clear. I'm just kind of comparing him to the previous version of himself. The rebounding has been a huge thing for him, but playing passing lanes, being disruptive, being an effective help defender, like Vando has done all those things. So I think, I said this before, I diverge from a lot of people in that, like, I think some people view him as like a 30-minute a night starter or like high 20s. I don't quite view him in that. I think he is one of those guys who just comes in for like 18, 20, 22, 24 minutes, wreaks havoc, causes chaos, causes disruption, and it is really effective in like 2 to 3 shifts a night. That's more of how I view him than a like 27 to 32 minute a night player. I think the Lakers are probably going to have 5 guys averaging 30 plus minutes when it matters. And it's going to be Luka, LeBron, Austin, Rui, and DFS. And everyone else is going to be in the mid-20s or below. Probably Jackson in the mid-20s, Vando in the early to mid-20s, and then Gabe in like the high teens to low 20s. And like, that's the 8-man rotation for the Lakers. So overuse is probably trying to play him in the high 20s. And we still don't really have clarity as to what his minutes restriction is right now. It seems to be like in the low to mid-20s. But I think underuse is the 6 minutes in Denver, right? Like, he should be a guy who's playing at least 14, 15 minutes a night. But I think it's probably a range of like 14 to 24 or so, 14 to 25, maybe on the high side, depending on the matchup. But look, if he somehow gets in a rhythm and he's hitting threes, it's like the Vando game where he hits like 4 or 5 threes, and maybe he's really locking someone down. I think there are exceptions where I'd be open to him playing more depending on the matchup, depending on the night. Next one from @DWade_role model. Do you ever catch yourself watching the game as a fan, even when you have to stay locked in because you're there to do a job? Keep up the work, Jovan, from Damon in Ontario, Canada. Well, thank you. Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. I do find myself watching the game as a fan, especially in crunch time. I think that's where just the natural basketball fan comes out, and it's like, what's going to happen? How is this chess match going to play out? How is this boxing match going to play out? Who's going to win the game, and who's going to solve the other team down the stretch? So I would even say like Lakers Mavericks. It was fun to watch that game over the final few minutes, and just how the Lakers were trying to attack Dallas, how Dallas was trying to attack the Lakers. And sometimes you just kind of get lost and caught up in it. I don't find myself rooting as a fan in the sense of like rooting for a particular outcome or rooting for a particular player or something like that. But I think just rooting for like a good game, a good finish, that is where I get caught up in it, and just kind of getting lost in the moment of like being 20 feet from the court, 10 feet from the court, 50 feet from the court, depending on where I'm sitting. And just being there, like in the moment, like that is one of the biggest perks and one of the most fun parts of the job and doing what I do. So certainly I will have stretches where I'm just like zoned in on the game, and I'm not thinking about what I'm going to write or what I'm going to say in the post-game reaction or what I'm going to say on the next podcast. Like I'm just fully locked in on the game. I try to always be as objective as I can. I'm human. I'm flawed. I'm going to have some level of bias or subjectivity, but I try to be as much of a objective third party as I can in those situations. But even within that, I am a basketball fan. I love basketball. So in a close game, it's just close the computer, sit back, and watch what happens. Next one from @David_D_Kim. Curious about how players' living situations and acclimating after a midseason trade must be tough. Yes, it is tough. I was talking to a player last night in the locker room who has been traded to the Lakers at some point this season. I will not specify, but they were talking about how they are currently living in a hotel, and their life right now is basically just being at the hotel or being at the practice facility or at the games. And like their life is basketball, working out, and living out of their hotel. So for these guys, it often is, they get to a place they live in a hotel. And depending on the player, depending on their appetite for spending, their appetite for risk, like a lot of this comes down to contract situation. Like, does the player think they could be traded again? How many more years are remaining? Like a guy like Luka, he's getting traded to the Lakers to be a Laker longer term, and he still has his contract situation to figure out. So I think he's a guy who could like go and look for a house. A guy like Maxi Kleba, he's a guy who has a year left on his contract and could potentially be traded this offseason. So I think that there's less certainty with a guy like him. DFS has a player option, so he has to weigh that as he's considering what to do. And is he extending? Is he resigning? Is he opting in? Then Markieff Morris is another guy who said that he was potentially going to retire depending on where he got traded to, but he got traded to LA. So with all those guys, like there are varying degrees of just weighing the cost benefit analysis of like buying a house, renting a house, buying a condo, renting a condo, apartment, or living out of a hotel. So more often than not, guys live in a hotel for longer than you would expect. At first, the team helps them get set up, and then eventually it's on them to make the payments and manage all that situation. But so most of them are living somewhere on the west side or in the South Bay area. That's typically where NBA players in Los Angeles live. Then sometimes they'll buy houses, like some guys live in the Valley or Brentwood or West Hollywood, Hollywood Hills area. But for the most part, especially if they're living in a hotel, it's typically West Side or South Bay area. It must be tough. I could say I've lived out of a hotel for about a third of the year on average, and it is not ideal. So that's the human part of this that we don't often talk about enough. Next one from @PokeyAmazing123. What are some of the big differences between covering the Clippers and covering the Lakers? Did switching to the Lakers feel like an upgrade in any way? I've answered this before, and I want to try to be respectful here, right? So I don't want to throw any shade or cause any more beef than I've had with, let's say, that organization over the past few years. But switching to the Lakers did feel like an upgrade because it's more of a national beat. It's arguably the national beat in terms of like it's Lakers, it's Warriors, it's Knicks, it's Celtics. Those are the four biggest teams in terms of coverage around the league. And with the Lakers, there may be an exception where I think there will always be some interest in the Warriors, the Celtics, the Knicks. Like Warriors, it's been more of a recent development, but Celtics and Knicks are two of the classic franchises, of course. But with the Lakers, they're almost bulletproof in the sense of like, even when they didn't have a star, even between the Kobe and LeBron era or like the end of the Kobe era, it was like they were still very relevant despite being a bad team. And I think the Lakers are just always relevant. They are a global franchise. They are the most famous franchise in the NBA internationally, and arguably the most famous American franchise around the globe, just period, comparing them to the Yankees or the Cowboys or whoever else you want to mention. So certainly like just getting more attention, like my following going up. Anytime I write about something or report about something or go do a podcast appearance, like you're talking about LeBron, you're talking about the Lakers, now you're talking about Luka. Like it is a different level from a visibility perspective. I would say that there are some differences in terms of like how the teams operate. I don't really want to get too much into that, but I would say the Lakers in general are more media friendly than the Clippers are. Certainly both teams have their pros and cons with all that stuff, but I would firmly say the Lakers are more media friendly than the Clippers, and I think they welcome being covered more than the Clippers do. And then, I would say that there's also the nuances within like the games and how that all operates, where the Clippers I've said are more like a family friendly, kid-friendly environment. Intuit Dome's insane. So I think maybe that's changed a little bit. I've only been to Intuit Dome twice for the Lakers-Clippers games, but I've always said it's more like a family, like it's a lot louder, that there's a lot more lights and just in-game stuff that's going on, where the Lakers, with the lighting around the floor, and it feels more like a Broadway show or something like that. You got all the celebrities courtside and the athletes courtside and stuff. So like I've long said, Lakers games feel more like date nights, and Clippers games feel more like family outings. But that's just my unofficial read on the situation. So there are a lot of differences. There are some similarities, of course, too, of just covering a team is covering a team, regardless of the context of things. But I would say it has been easier to cover the Lakers in one sense, and it's also been like my profile is definitely blown up, right? And I think I'm at a different level in my career for covering the Lakers compared to when I was covering the Clippers. Now I'm also older. I've also had more experience, so maybe I would have been on a similar trajectory covering the Clippers, but I think there is a bit of a limitation there in terms of the visibility compared to the Lakers. Next one from friend of the show and someone who's been on Buha's block before, at @MoDeKeel_NBA. What's your morning hair routine? So I've talked about this before on the lives, but I will give you an official answer. I might have even done this on one mailbag before. And it's funny because right now my hair is a little wild. I haven't gotten a haircut in a little over 3 weeks, which is long for me, just being on the road and scheduling with my barber. But I am getting a haircut tomorrow, so I'll be back to having my crisp fade as per usual. And so before I give Eddie hair advice or guidance, I want to clarify that like I could only speak to my type of hair, which I have straight hair and I have fine hair. I am of Serbian and Puerto Rican descent. So I can't give just blanket advice for people's hair. My general advice would be you only need to shampoo like once or twice a week, maybe 3 times tops, but you don't need to shampoo every day. Don't use a 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner. That is not good for your hair. Separate those two. And again, shampoo 1 to 3 times a week, condition 4 to 6 times a week, and you'll be good. That's the sweet spot. So that'll be like my general hair advice for everybody. But as for my type of hair, if you have similar hair to me, the keys are using some type of sea salt or texture spray to increase the volume of your hair. And then the second one is blow drying. So every day after I shower, my hair's wet. I will start to comb it into place a bit, just with my fingers. And then I will use a sea salt spray that I have, but I've used the texture spray before. That just kind of elevates your hair from the roots and gives you some of that volume. And at this point, I think my hair is like naturally become voluminous because of how long I've been doing this. But you do that when it's wet or kind of damp. Then you blow dry it into place. And with the sea salt or texture spray, it will start to form. And make sure you got to learn how to use a blow dryer. It is more art than science, but there's a way to use it correctly. There's a way to not use it correctly. You don't want to do it too hot. You don't want to do it too high. So I usually do it like low or medium on like warm temperature if I can. I've invested in a nice blow dryer. Then you finish it off with cool to lock it into place. Then I put in my hair product, which I use this Cub & Co. Hair clay from Australia. I've tested out, I've joked about this before, I've tested out well over 30 hair products in terms of typically hair clays, but sometimes pastes or pomades or whatever. And they're all kind of similar, though the ingredients matter in terms of like hold and whatnot. But I've tested out over 30 hair products. At one point, I got banned from Amazon for buying and then returning so many hair products. And they sent me an email saying, like, we've noticed you've been buying too many hair products. You can no longer do that. So I had to take a little bit of a break there. But I discovered this one, like I was in watching YouTube videos and on Reddit, it did like men's hair forums and stuff. And so I found this one that I really like. It works great for my hair and with the way that I style my hair. So keys again are don't over shampoo your hair, condition it though, and separate those two. Use a texture or sea salt spray, and then blow dry it, and then find the right hair product for you. It depends what you're looking for. Are you going for messy? Are you going for light hold? Are you going for stronger hold? In general, for my hair type, hair clays are a bit better. I prefer a stronger product that will keep my hair in basically its form for as long as possible. But some people like it a little bit more messier or looser. It really just depends what type of vibe you are going for. But that is my hair breakdown. I talk about this all the time. And honestly, I might make a hair product at some point because I am passionate about this. So you got me going, Mo. Thank you for the question. And I just nerded out about hair. Next one from @Jovan Buha Muse. How does it feel knowing that you're better than every other reporter in the NBA? Does it get old or does it keep you motivated? I am not going to answer that question because I am unfortunately not better than every other reporter in the NBA. But I will just shout out the Jovan Buha Muse. I appreciate you. It is wild that I have a Muse account. I'm honored. I'm flattered. It might be the biggest I made it moment of my career is having a Muse account on X. But yeah, I appreciate you for running that account, for starting that account. I appreciate the support and having my back online. If any trolls come at me, and we got to meet. You've tweeted pictures of me at games, and I know you go to games. So let's meet up. Let's make it happen. And final one from @Manas the Man. This is a big one. Where do you see the future of sports media heading? This is a question I ask myself on a daily basis and try to figure out on a daily basis. It's a big reason why I started my own podcast and my own YouTube channel, and just trying to think about the future of sports media. I think it is headed in a way where, similar to just all forms of entertainment, it is going to be very customized and tailored to the consumer, to the audience. So I think we've seen with entertainment, there's all the streaming platforms, right? And you pick which ones have the shows you like or the movies you like, and which ones you're willing to pay for. With music and stuff, it's do you want Apple Music, do you want Spotify? And with YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and stuff, you follow certain people, you subscribe to certain people, and it's all about adhering the content to you and your interests and your preferences. So I think there is a way that this is trending with that. I think we're starting to see people go more independent. I think we are seeing an increase in audio and video content. And I think the people who ultimately win out in the next 5 to 10 years with the sports media landscape are going to be doing that. I think if you look at people like Stephen A. and Nick Wright, they have their own individual podcasts separate from ESPN and Fox, and separate from their shows there, and they're building their own thing. So I'm trying to do that on my end. It is building my own empire, frankly, where I have a YouTube channel and a podcast that is self-sustaining, and I don't need to rely on anyone else longer term to have a spot in this industry, to have a salary in this industry. So I think that is where things are heading. That's why, again, I've been trying to diversify my skill set, diversify my content output with having a YouTube channel, having a podcast, doing some of the vlogging. And really, I think the next step for me is leaning more into the social media side with clips and whatnot. But I think this is a really good question. I think there is going to be a greater, we're probably going to see more player podcasts and shows and stuff. I think we are going to see every company lean more into the video side, the YouTube side, social side. And unfortunately for someone like myself on the writing side, I think that comes at the expense of writing, maybe not in the short term, but longer term. I am concerned about how many people are going to be reading 10 to 15 years from now, and maybe even 5 years from now. And honestly, now, I go back to USC where I'm an alum and talk to classes, and asking the students in attendance, basically the whole room says they watch YouTube and social clips and consume sports content from that. And very few people still actually read sports articles and features and all that stuff. So there's clearly a shift toward video and audio. I'm trying to be ahead of the curve, or at least ride that wave and ride that curve. And so I do kind of see it there will still be the big shows, the first takes and the first things first, and those types of shows. The debate shows, I think, will continue to live on. There'll still be the pre and post game shows with ESPN and NBC and Amazon. And there'll still be Pat McAfee and Bill Simmons. There's still going to be the tentpole shows and podcasts. And I don't think that stuff is going away. But everything else, I think, is going to you're going to have to kind of figure out the best way to get the biggest audience possible. And I think right now that's on YouTube. And that's also in the form of podcasting. So that's why, again, I'm trying to lean into this as much as I possibly can and continue to grow this out and make it even bigger and better. And I've got some exciting stuff coming. I am meeting with a design expert who has done logos for NBA teams and big brands. And I'm going to be going through my design with my Buha's Block logo, with my YouTube, with my social stuff. And we're going to kind of figure out the way to optimize that. I am bringing on some interns to help with social clips and help with producing the podcast and research for the podcast. And I'm trying to blow this up and get it as big as I possibly can. And I appreciate you all for rocking with me. And that'll do it for today's mailbag. Thank you so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Thursday night with a Lakers Timberwolves post-game reaction. I will talk to you then.